Good evening everyone. A warm welcome to all of you to this exciting and insightful event here at Lamakaan. We are gathered here today for a discussion titled What Can the 18th Lok Sabha Deliver to the Indian Youth? This topic couldn't be more relevant as we navigate the complex landscape of the recent political changes and the socio-economic challenges faced by the youth in India today. We are honoured to have with us Dr Rathin Roy, a distinguished professor from the Kautilya School of Public Policy. Dr Roy is also a senior visiting fellow at the ODI in London and has formerly served as the member of Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. His extensive experience and expertise in public policy and economic advisory makes him the perfect speaker to lead this discussion. Our discussion will also be moderated by Dr Anant Maringanti, a renowned geographer with a PhD from University of Minnesota. Dr Maringanti research and teaching focuses on urbanization and globalization from the South Asian perspective. He is currently the co-founder and executive director of the Hyderabad Urban Lab, a multidisciplinary research center dedicated to exploring urban issues. This event is brought to you in collaboration with Hyderabad Urban Lab and the Center for Development Policy and Practice. CDPP is a Hyderabad-based policy and research think tank which is committed to the development of vulnerable populations. We are grateful to everyone associated with Lamakaan for arranging this event here today as well. As we look forward to a thought-provoking session, we encourage all of you to engage actively in this dialogue. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rathin Roy and Dr. Anant Maringanti to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to take a few more minutes. Half of my work is already completed, so I'm just going to take advantage of that fact to talk about something which I really love talking about. Rathin, welcome to Lamakaan. I don't know if you have been here for very long, very often, but the quick history of Lamakaan is something that I always love telling when any event that we host here, and then a little bit about why we are doing it here. So Lamakaan is an institution which has become an institution now around an infrastructure which has been around for a long time. For people who have known Hyderabad, people who have known the art scene in Hyderabad, Lamakaan was a sort of a watering hole for a very long time. It was the residence of a scientist who was also a documentary filmmaker who lived here, and he called it Lamakaan, which Fri means there's no equivalent word for that in English or in any other language. It's a no place, right? It's a so it was meant to be a kind of place to which people come and make a place of it. That was the profound idea of Lamakaan. And then after his passing away, it was turned into a public institution where the idea was that a city like Hyderabad, which is deeply divided at so many different levels but also keeps coming together in all sorts of surprising ways, it deserves an open cultural space where we keep learning to define and redefine what does it mean to be an open cultural space. So we are constantly experimenting. We have an institutional structure in which you have a number of curators who are at a bare minimum operating like gatekeepers. Their job is to make sure that something that is against the principles of openness doesn't get to enter the place. That's all this. Beyond that, the curators often actually curate their own programs. So it could often be night schools, it could be lectures that the curators organize. We invite people from elsewhere. We make enough money from selling samosas and chai, which has worked very well for us. The Hyderabadi samosa and chai. Hyderabadi chai, which is just pointed out that it's not Hyderabadi samosa. But we do manage to make enough money to keep the place free. We don't charge a lot of money unless it is a ticketed event. So in some sense, this was also a response to the lack of availability of open, free space that is available to you at any point of time. So you could book a place like Ravindra Bharati for a play that you have prepared for 3 months, and then somebody at the last minute can come and say that now some minister wants it and the venue is taken away. So this was meant to be something that is openly and democratically managed, and that's what this was. Hyderabad Urban Lab was actually conceived here on the terrace of this building where we sat and we kept thinking about what kind of urban research do we need to do. And that partly came from my own trajectory as a researcher, as a journalist, as an activist, going through all kinds of places. And one of the things that we kept thinking is that we need some way of theorizing broader developmental processes being rooted in one location, right? It's important to figure out how to think about urban from Hyderabad. What does it mean if we say that this is where I'm looking at the world from? And we say this because we know that the urban, as we understand it very broadly, is an idea that comes from Chicago, right? So that's where it comes from. The largest amount of urban theory came from studies that were done on slums around Chicago University, right? That's where the ideas come from. So partly the idea was that we need to find ways of theorizing from local without trying to supplant the bigger ones, right? So the idea is that we build small, intermediate level concepts that can travel. And that means that you need to do a lot of your research in local languages. You need to build concepts from the local processes, phenomenon, events, and take them very seriously. So that's what we've been attempting to do. So we started our work in a scrap market in the middle of the city, which is a 150 years old place with something like 200 small scrap dealers, 2,000 scrap dealers with global connections all over the world. And they are people who watch what's happening on London Metal Exchange and yet operate in the local market, right? They know their limits, they know their struggles, but these are guys who are thinking about how do I get to Europe, which is the best country to enter with a Schengen visa so that I'm not going to get trapped. These are the kinds of things that the young people there are thinking about. So that's where we began our work, because we found that these guys had a lot of interesting things to say about the 2008 meltdown, which actually had consequences for the IT industry in Hyderabad, shut down industries, threw out their furniture, which landed up in the scrap market. So these guys knew what they were talking about. So the idea of Hyderabad Urban Lab is essentially that we try and figure out what happens locally at different places, and we've been very concerned about young people in the city, what they're learning, what they're not learning, where do they go, and so on. One of the questions that we often keep asking in many places is, how do children learn to become men and women in places like this? And what does that learning to become a man or a woman with a particular type of sexuality and gender ideologies associated with that, what does it really mean, right? What consequences will it bring to the way in which people are growing up? So that's what broadly we have been doing. So this talk today is one of the things that we keep doing very frequently. Whenever there is some big event that happens, we feel that it's time to kind of take a step back and reflect on what just happened and where can we go from here. And what looks like has happened is that there's been a lot of excitement and anticipation of how this Lok Sabha is going to look like. There were a lot of confusion, and finally we ended up with some numbers, and we were wondering, what does this mean in the coming months? So for many of us, it meant simply that you're going to have a lot of local chut-put riots beginning everywhere now because people are pissed off, right? We don't know what that means. We don't know what this means for long-term policies. So that's what we thought we should hear about, and we are so lucky to have Dr. Rathin Roy here, and I'm just going to hand it over to him at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anant, and thank you to everyone here for attending. I am now, insofar as I am going to be in India, back to where I was born. I was born up the road in Maritpati. So I am now Hyderabadi. I moved here last month. So it's very nice to be back and to see such a wonderful venue and to meet all of you and engage. And I hope to do more of that as time passes this year. I've already noticed one thing about Hyderabad which you probably take for granted, having lived all over India. This is still the politest city in India. I just don't understand how people are so polite. India is such a rude country. One of the reasons I wanted to live abroad was I used to go back to England. I used to tell people to queue and to say please and thank you and speak nicely. This is an amazing city. I mean, everybody is polite. Nobody is rude to you. And I do not understand how it's done, but it's a very wonderful and precious thing. I hope you hold on to it. Despite migration, you know, despite Gachibowli, even Gachibowli people are polite, which is remarkable. Okay, so on that I think is a good note to begin talking or reflecting about these elections, I'll take about half an hour, and then I hope we can have a good interactive discussion. There was an economist called Joan Robinson. She was quite an interesting person at a time when there were very few female economists. She taught at Cambridge, got prejudice from lots of people, including her husband, but she made India her part-time home. And she made one comment about India, Kerala really, which has always stayed with me, which is everything you say about India may well be true, but so is the opposite. And I think what these elections reflect is precisely that. Now I'm going to unpack that, because that doesn't mean that we can get away with sort of doing sort of ancient Hindu philosophy and saying sab maya hai, sab opposite bhi theek hai, ye bhi. And I'm not going there. I mean that has lessons for us, because I think to understand this election and its implications, we have to ask who is asking the question and why they're asking it. In a sense, this ties, I make a lot of, not a lot, I aspire to make a lot. I make a fair bit of money telling people what they haven't heard before. So organizations like this are, in a sense, a sort of, a trial balloon for me. So one thing I tell people about India, and this is very true of this election and its outcome, is the stock market is going to boom in India. That should satisfy not many people here, but normally people feel very happy. In fact, it would boom even more if the government were more competent. But the stock market is not going to boom because India is going to boom. Quite the opposite. It is in fact going to boom because India is not going to boom. So let us look for a minute at COVID and the background behind these elections. To give you, I think, a sense of what I'm trying to say, that a very difficult political project, which I have been engaged with for a long time, I think I and many others have yet again failed in making that project happen, which I will call the prosperity project. But let me tell you why we have failed and why the India story has failed in simple language. So when COVID happened and the economy so-called tanked, I noticed some interesting things. So, when you produce something, there are 4 ways you can make money. You can get wages, that is, you get employed by somebody and they pay you wages. You can lend somebody money to run a business and then they pay you interest on that. Then, very familiar in Hyderabad, you can build real estate and rent out houses, right? And you can make money from rents. And you can make profits from running companies, right? Which is, after you run a company, and whatever you do with that company, whether it's a brothel or it's a steel plant, after you have paid your rent, your interest on capital and your wages, what is left is your profit. Now, what had happened massively during COVID, but then I discovered has been happening in India since about 2016, is, okay, since 2016, wages in India have been stagnant. Rents in India have also been relatively stagnant, not house prices, rents. Then what happened during COVID was very interesting. The demand for capital fell. So companies like Reliance, etc. began going debt free. That is, they began returning the money they had borrowed, so they didn't have to pay interest on the money. So the demand for capital fell, and banks were sitting on lots of money which they were not lending. That has changed slightly in a worrying fashion. I'll come to that in a minute. So then, what does that mean? That means profits went up, but then growth fell, right? Right? During COVID, growth fell, but profits went up, which means, and this is great if you're in the business of profits, you can hire a yacht and marry your son off with great style, that you made more money by selling less. We produced less in this country, and the people who made profits made more money than anybody else. Who are these people? Exactly 80 listed companies. Now look at the flip side. If your wages are not going up, my capital is not earning interest, right? And rents are stagnant, then my profits are going up because my costs are going down. I don't have to produce more. In fact, I have no incentive to produce more. Why should I produce for you? I'll produce less. and make more money. What do stock markets respond to? Not rents, not wages, not even interest on capital. Equity responds to profits. So the stock market is booming, and some people are very happy. And as long as the economy keeps tanking, the stock market will boom. So if you're asking the question from the vantage of the suit boot in BKC in Bombay, and you're paying me 3,000, I'll tell you, it is good for you that the India story has failed. Because your profits will go up because nobody else gets to make any money. Only you get to make money. So tera chandi hai. This is not normally possible in smaller economies, and that's my second point. It's all very odd. I did my PhD on this 31 years ago, but 30 years. But if you think about the Indian economy, we are 1.4 billion people, right? I think we are now at least 1.4 billion. Of whom, let's say 10% of the economy is very rich. That is 140 million. I mean, okay, chalo, 5%, 70 million. Now, the weird thing about this economy is that if you're only interested in making money, 70 million rich Indians is like the German market. 70 million rich Indians is like the UK market. Now, think about it like I do as an economist. Therefore, if you want to make more and more money, you keep milking the demand of this 70 million, make sure they get richer. And they can only get richer if the remaining 1 odd billion stay poor. Okay, I wrote my thesis on this 30 years ago. Then I asked the question, why don't people do this in every large country? And the answer comes from the Russian Revolution. There was great growth in Russia before the revolution, you know. Then the war came and things happened, but there was great growth, privatization, stock markets were booming, lots of things were happening under the Tsar. It was a very good life. Just like India, good life in the 2000s. What happened was the revolution, they come and murder you. It was very inconvenient, but you know, you make money, then these masses come and murder you. So how do you prevent that from happening? You have to either shoot them, or you give them handouts. And you have to calibrate the handouts to make sure that they're not too unhappy, and they're not too happy. You know, a mild dissatisfaction is what you want, because that will keep your handouts low. Too much money to this 1 billion, and they will start demanding. Too little money, and they might get annoyed, and they might get mad, and they might do protests, and then you have to shoot them. It's very expensive, because if you shoot them, then you have to shoot them again tomorrow and again. That was my thesis. I got my tenure in a paper on this, stupid paper. But, you know, so it's much better to give welfare handouts. So you have to calibrate the welfare handouts. Now come back to India and test my thesis. What has the government been doing over the last 10 years? Actually, governments over the last 25 years, but particularly over the last 10 years. In the face of this stagnation in wages, in the face of this stagnation in everything except profits, 800 million people are being given food subsidy. We have a new category of people in India. I shouldn't be too political, right? I will be. ये मोदी जी की गारंटी है, किनको गारंटी देते हैं मोदी जी? Not to citizens of India, not even to Hindu citizens of India. That would also be unacceptable, but I would understand it. There is a new category he has created. I don't know the Telugu word for it, but I know the Hindi word for it. Not Nagrik, लाभार्थी. क्या बात है भाई? तो लाभार्थी बन गए सब लोग. 800 million people have become लाभार्थीs. Other words are beneficiaries, you know. This marks an interesting change again, linked to what I've been saying. It's an evolutionary process, okay? It began actually with the Congress. It has actually, in my view, happened since 1991, but it has galloped. It has accelerated since 2014. That we have moved from being a state and a society which is interested in, very simple word I have, prosperity. Mutual prosperity, to being what I call, and I've written about this, a compensatory state. India may now, the government's main job is, a lot of young people here, I'm sorry you didn't get a job. पैसे ले ले थोड़ा सा. You didn't have food, थोड़ा सा खा ले. अंबानी तू जा इटली, तू खा ले. 800 million people, एक cylinder ले ले मुझसे. So it is constantly trying to compensate people, and people know this. for the failure to engage in a development transformation. And I call this the compensatory state, and this is state governments and central government. So when people talk about reudi, freebies, it's all bullshit. This is the core function of government in India, to compensate people for the comprehensive all-round social and economic failure to foster one thing, collective prosperity. And I think where I failed, and what this election showed me, many of us have failed, is that when you have a massive political consensus in India, from Naidu Garu, to Reddy Garu, to Stalin Garu, to Modi Garu, to Rahul Garu, about the function of the state being to compensate and to give you little handouts while somebody else takes the money, it is then very difficult to come up with an ideology that is progressive. And without an ideology, if you're going to be a broker, then your political success is going to be limited. Brokering will not help you get political success. So the way I read this election is very disappointing for me. I'm not happy with the fact that, I'm not a BJP supporter. Let me put my cards on the table. I want them to lose badly. Not because of the economy and all that, that would be nice, but I don't have anybody else who's thinking about the economy as I do. I've tried, but because they're bigoted, okay, I don't like bigots. So, with the fact that they lost 10 seats in UP and Modi ji got only 1 lakh votes in Banaras, all this has nothing to do with the long-term idea that the BJP has put forward and which it shares with every other political party in India, which is that the way we will progress is for the rich few to do well and the poor to be compensated. And the fight is only about how much compensation we will give. Now, in some places where the problem is extreme, I am from Maharashtra, and there the problem is extreme because Maharashtra is full of young people. Maharashtra is a fairly prosperous state, and it was fairly clear to me that a lot of people in Maharashtra under the age of 35 had seen through this. And they were very angry. It is good to be angry, especially if you're under 35. It is good to be angry all the time. It is particularly important to be angry, in my view, under the age of 35. Because this con game is being played essentially with your futures. It's a bit like climate change. Don't look at me for climate change. I'm 57, I'm going to be dead, hopefully, by the time climate change hits me. It's your problem. So you do something about it, get angry about it, In the same way, the sense of anger regarding the lack of decent employment opportunities and the consensus amongst all the political parties that this would not happen was very prevalent in my view in Maharashtra. I don't know whether here it was or not. Certainly in Maharashtra it was, which is why I was flabbergasted by the exit poll results in Maharashtra. I didn't realize the scam was being played for somebody to make money in the stock market and all that. I keep forgetting. But the reason why I saw something positive happening for the first time, at least looking at the Marathi papers, was the huge response of younger people in Maharashtra, urban or rural, thank you, to this apprenticeship scheme that Rahul Gandhi announced. It was a great idea for young people because it offered you a concrete opportunity to make some money and get some skills, which would then hopefully give you a pathway to a career, which is what people want. Regrettably, this only happened in Maharashtra, to my knowledge. It may have happened in Tamil Nadu, I don't know. It may have happened here, I don't know. It certainly did not resonate in West Bengal or in Rajasthan or in Madhya Pradesh or in UP. The reason why people did not vote for the BJP in these places has nothing to do with Rahul Gandhi's offer of an apprenticeship. So that then leads me to the second takeaway from this election, which is a very depressing takeaway, that the feeling that logically you would feel that when a state is doing well or a geography is doing well, such as Kerala or Tamil Nadu or Telangana or Maharashtra, there should be a coalition around the concept of prosperity. I think that idea has been blown out of the window by this election. It doesn't matter whether you're a state earning $300 per capita and you're close to Indonesia like Kerala or Tamil Nadu, or you're a state with $900 per capita, which has per capita income poorer than Nepal, like Uttar Pradesh. The vote share of the BJP has gone up here. And if you take my thesis seriously, forget the communal and bigoted angle for it. If everybody is offering you Labharthi, then you will go for the party that does it best. See, one of the interesting things about the BJP that I think you should note and remember, which I learned, somebody wrote about, it's not my idea, but I think it's a very important idea, is that you see, at least the BJP from in 2014 onwards, whenever it implemented an economic project, such as Swachh Bharat or the gas cylinders, the party was involved because they had a party to get involved. Whereas when the Congress, even from 2004, even before that, when the Congress tried to implement a political project, Congress party was not involved. The state was involved, and then in the end it became ridiculous. The civil society was involved. Suddenly there was a NAC and Jean Drèze, they're nice people, but the point is you have a party, right? You're doing politics, you're not doing civil society. So why using civil society as the excuse for your party? It obviously shows a huge operational disconnect between your prosperity project and what you're really doing with your political party, which is something else. That advantage the BJP always has, that its political party is actually involved and engaged. And when it is not, again I have to go back to Maharashtra, it is punished. It is plausible, I'm not certain, that in UP it was punished for a similar reason. It is plausible, but I'm not certain, that in MP it was not punished for that reason, because I'm told there was a man there called Mamaji, I love these Hindi film analogies, who is now the agriculture minister, Mamaji was very efficient, and Mamaji transformed Madhya Pradesh agriculture. I don't know anything on Madhya Pradesh. It's a dry land state, I only go by. When I should take trains, I have to pass through it. That's all I know about it. But apparently, Mamaji did good things there and connected with the people. So my takeaway from the election, from this vantage, is the following. I think there is a huge political vacuum which has to do with, well, there are some difficulties here which I'll come to, which has to do with the lack of an ideology of shared prosperity. And to the extent that that political vacuum exists and the alternative offered is compensation, to date, the most efficient political parties in providing that compensation happen to be the DMK and the BJP. And they are providing you with a relatively more efficient model of cooperation. Are people satisfied with this? Of course not. Are there other factors that are involved in people's dissatisfactions? Yes, there are. But I do not buy, and I'm being controversial here, this idea. I mean, it may be true at the margin, but I don't think it was something that affected electoral outcomes that much. That, I'm putting this to you as a controversial point, that Dalits and OBCs were worried about the Constitution of India and therefore they voted against the Constitution of India. I think Dalits and OBCs may have well been worried about the fact that it's an essentially upper caste party in some geographies, not in Madhya Pradesh, again it's India. Everything you say, the opposite will be true. Not in Madhya Pradesh, it could be possible, but in Rajasthan in a more calibrated way, in UP, certainly in Maharashtra, was essentially an upper caste party. Not really a Hindu party, it was an upper caste party. And therefore, I've seen this in Maharashtra, I can go into a long discourse on Marathas, OBCs in Maharashtra. But, and they were not happy with the way this game was being played, and therefore they thought that, they should vote against the people who are playing this game. That is very well possible. But therefore, in this election, in my view, I mean, we can discuss what I call Charana wala Chanakya politics. I do a lot of it. I'm not dissing it. I also want Naidu to go and finger this government. I want the government to fall. I'll feel happy. But that Charana wala Chanakya politics does not take away from the fact that in that sense, in this election, things have stayed very much the same. I wrote an article before the election happened, saying that there is a choice here between mediocrity and prosperity. It's a very stark choice, and I'll tell you why. I'll have to rewind a bit on this, but I'll tell you why. See, I'm from Bombay, I'm from Maharashtra, and I grew up in Bollywood. So I like to think of things like movies. including the fortunes of a country and development. The problem ये होता है कि this movie we make ना, this country movie, it's been made everywhere in the world. इसका normally happy ending नहीं होता है, tragedy होता है. You start from, forget Japan, South Korea and Western Europe. Look at the rest of the world, sir, Pankaj. Brazil, sad ending. Argentina, sad ending. Philippines, sad ending. Egypt, sad ending. Sri Lanka, sad ending. Pakistan, to chodo hi. You look around you, all these countries, the world is full of $10,000 per capita basket cases. What do I mean by that? It's called in economics the middle income trap. But to give you a sense of it, it means you will live in a country that is 3 times richer than India is today. Okay, not PPP, in dollar terms. In that country, you will have substantial poverty. You will have substantial difficulty of living. You will have substantial challenges in human development, in health, in education. You will have all the problems we have today at $10,000 per capita. And you will be stuck at $10,000 per capita. That is called in economics the middle income trap. Now, I'm 57 and 58, and all my life, I was to think about this movie, and that's why I did economics and all this. This movie mein picture abhi baki hai, India ke liye. Picture baki hai. I don't know. I'm not saying everything is solved, but hamesha picture baki tha. And that gave me a lot of pride. I mean, not this Modi style pride, but pride in the fact that there was a country here which had done a wonderful experiment. This cacophony has to go. When I lived in Europe, I used to tell people, I said, you guys are just a failed version of India. You can't even get your fiscal policy right. हम तो budget भी चलाते हैं, सब कुछ करते हैं. And there was a hope that in all this chaos, there was a generalized movement towards progress. With all the difficulties we had, with our very parochial, patriarchal, casteist society, with so many people being left behind, there was always a hope that that would change. What is worrying me is the window for that hope is now closing. The more and more compensation becomes the discussion we are having. And this election has done absolutely nothing to change that ground. There are things that may happen to change things in the interregnum between, because you said what after this election, between this election and the next. So there is always hope. I may not sound like it when I write, but I'm actually quite an optimist. I think there is a substantial minority of politicians, typically those under 40, 75% of them are dynastic, who get that this entire game that their fathers played may not play out as well with them. I can tell you who one of them is, because I've discussed it with him, Tejashwi Yadav. He understands this, he gets it. He doesn't know what to do about it, but he gets it. Akhilesh Yadav gets it after 1 year. But everything, he's lagged by 1.5 years. Okay, and by the way, in this I hope Arvind Kejriwal will be the last politician of the old compensatory variety. Because think about him, he was the great hope, India against corruption and all that. Sabko topi kaisa pehna? I don't know how many of you were involved. Kya topi pehna? Wow. But Mr. Kejriwal has, what was his ideology? That was a slight move away from compensatory state. It was what I call the Samsung ideology, or the Air India ideology. कि मैं तेरा service delivery अच्छा करूँगा. No ideology at all. बस I will give you better service. मैं मोहल्ला clinic खोलूँगा. So you'll have more efficient delivery of the services that the state provides. There was no aspiration there towards collective prosperity or anything that they did. I think that is changing now. I think I see that changing of all places. Let me see. The parties I've spoken to, the new MPs when I was in Delhi, I think it's changing in Telugu Desam. It is definitely changing with MPs like Varsha Gaikwad in the Congress. I think they feel that they're on to something here, and they're not clear what it is, and I also can't help them beyond the point. We all have to help them by pushing this prosperity agenda, that they feel that there are votes, there is long-term political security, and there is a political project to be made out of shared inclusive prosperity. I'm not overstating my project. It is a minority of people. It is a few people, and they can easily be infracted, because politics by its very nature is a short-term business. And in India, a very disempowering business, because no politician has oversight over the electorate as a whole. Therefore, every politician who is a genuine one, not a demagogue, or a dynast, is trying to make sense of this larger whole from the place they come from the ecosystem they know. But within that, I think there is hope. The second hope I have is actually coming from a lot of young people here, so tell me if I'm wrong, huh? From this neat cheating business. बहुत अच्छा हुआ ये, मैं बहुत पसंद हुआ, बहुत खुश हूँ. I wish that there's a cheating scandal that happens in every entrance exam in this country. You know why? I used to work for the Pay Commission. And this is going to be, I think, a very important political feature of what's going ahead. So I was a member of the last Pay Commission. Pay Commission is this thing where you pay babus every 10 years. You pay them more than their DA for some reason. Anyway. Now in that Pay Commission, a lot of posh people came, suit boot, and told me they thought I was also suit boot. So they came to me. And they said, you know, Dr. Roy, we should have lateral entry. And we should really have competent people, you know, coming in to work in government, you know, people with skills and qualifications. Who are all these people who are working? I said, Dekho, don't mess with national security. The civil service exams and the entire system of competitive exams we have in our country are a national security safety valve. You know why? And this came to me the moment I was the Pay Commission, because the IAS came, they always do, and said, we should be paid as much as IIM, you know, people who leave IIM Ahmedabad. I said, why? You have a BA in Sanskrit. I'll pay you as much as a BA in Sanskrit. That's the minimum qualification. Then I realized that primary school teachers are more qualified than the IAS because they have to have a BA. Kam se kam BA hona chahiye na uske upar. You know, so there was a strange inversion of status and qualification, which I found extremely amusing and worrying. I thought about it and I said, oh my God, of course. Now, this is a speculation, but I think it's an interesting speculation. Okay, it's a good venue for the speculation. So my theory is this, look, it's just math. 1.4 billion people we are. It's the youngest population in the world. Kya hai? Sab young log hai na idhar. Buddha log kam hai mere jaise. So all these young people, they are born reasonably equally across India, controlling for fertility. So in any given time, there are about 300 to 400 million people, young people. By young, I mean under 30. 16 to 30. Of those 400 million, at least 10%, okay, 5% will be super intelligent, 20 million. Of them, 90% will live in small towns, tier 2, tier 3. Now, if you're a super intelligent guy who is not from a rich family or a thug, living in a tier 2 town, what is your first experience of the state? Your first experience of the state is exploitation. Babu aake marta hai, ye aata hai, wo corruption hota hai. Why am I focusing on the smart guy? Because smart people with hormones are dangerous. You know, because they know they're smart and they're not going to just sit back and take it. They're going to try and find ways around it. They're going to get angry. And you don't want that. You really don't want that. So some of them will become drug dealers, some of them become liquor contractors, some will become chief minister. But that's not going to absorb 40 million, huh? Maximum 3 million, 3.5. What do you do with the rest? तो बगावत हो जाएगी, देश टूट जाएगा. देश नहीं टूटा है, देश बहुत बढ़िया है. You create the Indian version of the American dream. It doesn't matter तुम कॉलेज में क्या करते हो, तुम स्कूल में क्या करते हो. वो बोलने की बात है that you are disciplined to study and not think. That's part of the disciplining. Your parents will do it to you and all that. But basically what you got to do is participate in the Indian dream, which is irrespective of your social status. Take an exam. Which exam? Top exam is IAS exam, I think. IIT भी है कहीं बीच में, फिर वो NDA है, पता नहीं क्या है, फिर सिपाही आता है, बैंक ऑफिसर. कितने एग्जाम्स हैं, कितना मजा आता है, कितने एग्जाम्स हैं, hundreds of thousands of exams, and you keep taking these exams. Now all I need to happen is every district in India from Tiruchirappalli, you know, to Maharajganj, I need one kid to crack the UPS, that grade 1, that whatever, वो 89 batch, 90 batch जो बोलते हैं, वो, and I need the picture to come out in the newspaper, कि बच्चा ने देखो crack कर दिया, ठीक है? And that guy needs visibility. You notice that he's getting up more and more. As long as I have a reasonable distribution of such people, people will keep taking exams, and they will keep taking exams, and they will keep taking exams. And as the problem gets worse and I don't fix it, I will increase the age limit. क्या है ना? 23 से चला गया ना 32 तक. Keep increasing the age limit, and I need 1 to 2% success rate. Actually, I'm getting 5%. It's quite good. Once I do this, now you will ask, what happens to 95% to fail or 90% to fail? वो 30 साल के हो गए यार, टूट चुके हैं. कोई revolution नहीं आएगा उनसे. They're finished. They're finished. So you have created this, what I call national security way of dealing with young people, which is why I want NEET to fail. Because this requires one thing, this requires basic faith in the system of competitive exams. And if this basic faith is challenged, you're going to get a very different kind of politics in the next 2 or 3 years. A very different kind of politics from a segment. I think there are two things we will need if you're going to have a better politics in this country in 2029. One, we will need to have young people far more engaged, and young people are not going to engage on abstract questions of constitution. They're going to engage on things that directly affect them, and NEET and its legitimacy affects them. So once they start questioning the legitimacy of these things, you are going to get, I think, far more political energy in the system from quarters that hitherto have been suppressed by the great system of Indian competitive exams. The final point I want to make is a troubling one, which has to do with federalism, which is, I think, I don't know if people have noticed this, probably not, but and this is very much going to be, I think, in place. So I mentioned youth. There is one silence here, which is I don't think you can have any kind of massive tectonic political change in this country unless it's a feminist change. And there will have to be something happening on that front. It is not happening. We can take it up in the discussion. But I'm conscious of time. So the last point I want to make is this. India is a country which, in my experience, is unique amongst countries in the world for one very unpleasant reason. Where we are sitting in South India, the income and per capita income and human development levels are comparable to, in UP and Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, they are worse than Nepal. This has been the case for about 50 or 60 years, and it's not simplistic by any means. UP was not an agrarian state. UP actually deindustrialized. I don't know why it deindustrialized, but it deindustrialized massively from 1960 onwards. So it's not as simple as South Indians are rich and diligent and go to class and do STEM, and UP people are, dullards or anything like that. It's more complex than that. But the fact remains, the end result is that UP's per capita income is $900, less than Nepal, and Tamil Nadu's per capita income is $3,100, equal to Indonesia. What we have been doing in this country, which really struck me, I used to work in this organization called the Finance Commission, which determines, the share that each state gets in the taxes of India. And there is a formula. The biggest element in that formula, about 50% on average, was the inverse of the per capita income of a state, which is the poorer a state was, the more money it got, which is why Bihar gets more than Telangana. And what really struck me about India, and I felt very happy about the fraternity of this, was throughout my time in the 13th Finance Commission or the 12th Finance Commission, or when I saw the 14th, when I was at an IPFP, no state objected to this. Maximum my own state would come and tell me that, we have poor areas in Maharashtra too, so why don't you give some grants for Marathwada? Nobody said the principle is wrong. So what we were doing was that the South was growing and fiscal transfers were trying to correct for that. What do I mean by the South was growing? It was growing in a very extractive way. It's not that the South was better than the North. The South imports labor from the North and the East. You know what? We also import capital. Because if there's something called the credit deposit ratio, which is for 1 rupee deposited in Bihar, how much is lent out in Bihar? And that ratio is less than 1 in Bihar and more than Tamil Nadu, which means money is sucked away from Bihar and UP into businesses in the South. And the pandemic also taught me, I don't know, I think Raja Singh is a very lucky man. You all treat him as one of your own. But recent migrants, you don't treat like you treat Raja Singh. You treat them as migrants. That's why you call them migrants. They're called migrant labor, right? And for a variety of sociological reasons, they don't have roots in the South. Otherwise, the problem would be solved. Lots of Biharis would come here and UP people would come here. And the population would equalize and prosperity would equalize. That is not happening. At the same time, there is a political divide between the North and the South, which is getting more and more stressful, particularly since because of crony capitalism and many other such things. And this divide fundamentally is going to come to a head unless they finesse it again with the delimitation that is due in 2026, which will effectively mean that UP and Bihar plus one other North Indian state will have a permanent majority in the Lok Sabha. If that becomes a political flashpoint, then let me illustrate to you in very simple language before I close on what this means. Why is this a political flashpoint? Because it means that India is a country where areas or geographies where the minority lives are more prosperous than where the majority live. This is not true of the USA. Prosperous people live in New York and California and Chicago, which is where the majority live, and they are the more prosperous. This is not true of Europe. All third-class places in Europe, now they are not so third-class, but permanent third-class, Greece, Portugal, all these third-class places, Moldova. Nobody lives there. People live in Germany, France, England, majority population. And so on and so forth. You look at any country in the world. The only geographies in the 20th century where the majority of the population lived in poorer areas, according to my research, are Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, and if you control for extraction, the former Soviet Union. I'm accenting a political settlement where the majority of the population is poor within a nation state and the minority geographies are rich, and that divide keeps increasing, can only be papered over by fiscal transfers. And then when a flashpoint like delimitation comes, it is going to become central to the politics of a nation. So let me conclude. There are two India stories, depending on where you sit. One is the stock market story, and one is the other story. I hope I have managed to convey to you why the stock market story, in fact, relies on India not growing and being inclusive. The less inclusive India is, the more, and when I said incompetence of government, I meant government of India is so incompetent, they can't even privatize. कब से LIC कर रहे 3 साल हो गया, करते तब शांति मेरा पैसा बनता ना. So, because they're not able to privatize LIC, they're not able to privatize or disinvest anything, the stock market music is not even larger than it is now. But other than the stock market, nobody else is making money, and that is going to happen in a failed economy, in an economy where prosperity is not at the center of the story. So depending on where you sit, that is my first takeaway. In that sense, therefore, the election is disappointing, because this is very much something that people felt and experienced across at least the last 5 years. They should have experienced it over 20 years, in my view, but at least over the last 5 or 10 years, the experience has been stark. And with COVID, it was even more stark. But this simply did not resonate in the election, either on the demand side, which is the electorate, or on the supply side, in terms of the game the political parties were playing, which is actually a remarkably consensus game, not a development game, but a compensatory. My third takeaway is that there are fault lines coming up. And then I said some cheerful things for everybody here about young politicians who are conscious of this. But believe me, it's fairly subliminal, what I'm saying. So a lot of work we got to do to make sure they keep getting conscious. And the way they keep getting conscious is if you hold fire to their feet. And there are 2 or 3 things that are happening in this country which will hold fire to their feet. The first is the failure of the NEET. The failure, for the first time, the discrediting of the competitive exam system. I think that is going to be a major feature in how things play out tomorrow. The second is, I think, going to be the federal story. The North-South divide and the place where it is taking us. This is not something you can deal with rhetoric. This is not something that you can frame a consensus on. This actually involves making hard, what we in economics call zero-sum game choices. And if the country has to confront them, then our politics will of necessity become more serious. Will this all lead to the happy ending that I hope for? Quite likely not, but at least it opens up the possibility. Because if we continue on the path that we are continuing, and the next election is fought on the same premises as this one, then I'm afraid और picture बाकी रही है. Thank you.
Okay, so while we wait for someone to raise their hands, please. Oh, okay, already. Isha.
It's Rathin, and it was lovely hearing you after many years. I heard you at a grad student workshop a few years ago in Bangalore. So I have a bunch of questions. The first is, since by reading of your assessment of the stock market situation and why India is not going to grow just because of that, is also somewhere coming from my understanding of how speculation in the economy works. And therefore, I wanted to learn what might you have to say about the question of structural transformation, which has been a long-standing debate. And there was a recent article saying that there's been some manufacturing growth and therefore structural transformation is not entirely services-led. But I think there is an aspect of speculation on which we are entirely dependent on, including the new kinds of jobs, or in fact one can't even call them jobs, they are technically gigs in the platform economy. It's entirely driven by a speculative economy of venture capital. So therefore, could you also place this growth story somewhere with regard to how the connections between speculation and the creation of any kind of employment is taking place? And the second was a question about, I wanted to learn more about your position. I couldn't fully get if it was a critique of the Aam Aadmi Party's policies in terms of their subsidy and heavy state subsidy for education, public health and water. Because while I acknowledge that it's not rooted in any ideology, it's not driven by, it's more a pragmatic solution which one could also criticize in terms of how the state wants to be a service provider. But there are, of course, analysts who have also argued for, like say for instance, the Delhi Jal Board providing water to every settlement irrespective of its legal status. So a Juggi which would earlier struggle to get a water connection now gets it as a matter of this Jal Adhikar connection which the Delhi Jal Board introduced. And a lot of housing rights groups, urbanists, right to the city scholars did appreciate that. So I was hoping if you could speak a bit more on where the critique of the economics of it comes from, because I have a different perspective as an urban scholar working in the right to the city tradition. Thanks.
So on speculation and gig economy, I think these are going to be peripheral to the happy ending. They're very important for the sad end. I used to live in Brazil, and Brazil had a gig economy long before India. It's a wonderful gig economy. People were selling wonderful ice creams. People were making a little bit of money there, etc., etc. But that gig economy and speculation will lead you into a $10,000 middle income. To see this better, I'm going to go on a theme. I apologize to everyone here, especially the Kautilya students who heard it from me ad nauseam. See, in our economy, you've got to get the problem. When I said all this, the wages and rent. Forget all the poor people. I mean, don't forget them. But poor people have to be subsidized. You can't do much about poor people. But remember, poverty in India is not as grand as it was all those years ago. You can quibble 9%, 15%. I'm not interested in those people for this purpose of this argument. We will have to subsidize them. They are not productive actors in the economy. But the remaining people in this country, let's take the top 50% of the population, which are 700 million people, not the top 10%, which is 100 billion. So that's 600 billion each way. To be in that category, you have to earn roughly the minimum wage. Minimum wage to 3 times a million. Now I ask myself, if I'm earning, see, I'm not a communist, so I don't like handouts. You know, I used to work in the UN, I used to find it quite obnoxious when all my colleagues would say, oh, we must have public health. I said, tu to health insurance leta hai, tu to private mein jata hai, like our civil servants. Sab bhagte private mein. You know, public health karo. Kya hai? So, I mean, jo karna hai wo, you know. So, in the same way, what does a person want? A person wants to earn enough to be able to buy some things for himself and the people, you know, his kith and kin or her kith and kin, right? What are the basic things as a minimum wage guy, say my grandfather was a working class guy in the railways in Bombay would want? You'd want to buy food for your family without subsidy, right? I mean, the economics shouldn't be such that somebody earning the minimum wage or 2x the minimum wage or 3x the minimum wage has to buy food which is subsidized, either on the supply side or the demand side. You want to buy clothes for your family, which I'll come to in a minute. You want to get a house. And you know, you want to get a house like we buy a house. At least, I've never bought a house. I mean, I did once. But, you know, if I wanted to buy a house, if I was your age and I wanted to buy a house, what would you do? You'd look for a job to earn you enough money. You would pay EMI. You'd buy a house. And if there was no horrible event in your family like cancer or accident or pair tudiya, what hota hai India mein? But suppose you led a reasonably non-volatile life, over 20 years you'd pay back your loan, you'd own a house. We all want that. You'd want to be able to pay, whether it's publicly funded, privately funded, for healthcare for your family. And you want your children to get a decent education. Not Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, but a decent education. As things stand, none of these things happen in India. None of these things happen. And you cannot buy a subsidized meal if you earn 3 times the minimum wage. Shirts, sorry, those who have heard this before on TV, this shirt I'm wearing, this works, is from Marks and Spencer. It costs 3,000 rupees. It is made in India, 100%. Wow, Atmanirbhar Bharat, Bahan, Viksit, whatever. But if you go and try and buy a 200, 250 rupee shirt at Medipatnam or something, 82% of those shirts are imported from Bangladesh and Vietnam. Kya desh hai yaar? I can tell you the story in the feedback. We can make shirts for rich people. We can't make shirts for poor people. We have to import housing. Why should I have PM Awas Yojana for people earning the minimum wage? Why is it not possible commercially through the market? Remember, I'm an economist, not a communist. To produce houses for people, I know why. Health, education is a much more complex story. So unless these 5 things that people can afford become 60 to 70% of the growth that this country enjoys, another 10% comes from exports and 20% comes from what we all enjoy, FMCG, Indigo, all this. All right? You're not going to get prosperity in this country. On the question of AAP, let me put it this way. I'll take the example, कल बकरीद था ना, तो मैं बकरीद का उदाहरण. बकरीद में क्या होता है? कुर्बानी होती है. And what happens to those goats if they're not brought up by Jains? What happens to those goats? When कुर्बानी होती है, सब तो खाते नहीं ना, जो कुर्बानी करता है वो बैठ के नहीं खाता है एक बकरी. हाँ, so that bakri is then given to poor people, to indigent people, right? And that is not a bad thing. But that's not an ideology. That is charity. What you want is a society where everybody can afford to go to the market and buy a goat when they want. Not sit there waiting for Bakri Eid, कि कोई अमीर आदमी कुर्बानी करेगा और मुझे खाना है. Well, maybe it will happen for 10% of the population if they're disabled or they're unable to work or there some circumstance in which they're inhibited. But it cannot be happening for a plurality of the population is dependent on charity and subsidy. And there I think, I'm afraid, I have heard nothing from the Aam Aadmi Party. When it comes to giving titling, when it comes to fixing a dysfunctional state, everything they are doing is good, but it does not add up to an ideology. Mere dil mange more.
Let's take all of them at once.
I think my question, Dr. Roy, is you standard comments on business standards. I had a couple of questions. Yeah, all the time. I had a couple of questions for you. The first question was, what are your prescriptions for us for all the problems that you mentioned? How do we get out of a situation where our social contract is based on compensation and transfer payments? The second question is, don't we have a bit of a universal basic income kind of thing going on where the people that are getting transfer payments, they have some kind of income effect so they can spend on other things? The third question is, with respect to a successful stock market and a failing economy, what does the end game look like?
2 more questions here.
Is the only party who has been successful in being able to implement their schemes. So my question to you is it not that it is because of the worship of the BJP party of a particular leader and their blindness to the ideology that they're so motivated to do the work, instead of just their ability to do the welfare work which they're trying to do and implement the policies for the nation? That's it.
Can you speak up a little bit because the people at the other end are not able to hear?
My question was, sir, you were saying the 2024 election result didn't do much for the idea of shared prosperity in India. Yeah? I wanted to ask, do you think in the 2024 premises, what do you think would have been a better result for this? Or do you think the entire premises itself needed to change?
Thank you for the talk, sir. This is again addressing the student scams. 3-4 days ago we had the government invalidating the UGC NET exam as well. It's very interesting how papers get leaked and a lot of electoral data doesn't get leaked in this country. But yeah, so 2 questions. One is that by taking away these exam systems, that calls for a total overhaul of the system itself, of how students are pushed to study, the coaching centers, the coaching mafia in this country itself. So when you're taking away such a big system, what is the alternative the state would seek to replace it with? because I don't think this is just a political party issue. It's for incompetency from political parties, but not a structural issue from a party. It's a state issue. So what's the alternative to the same if that has to be offered to Indian students or the Indian lifestyle? That's my question, sir.
Okay, let's hear the answers for that and then we'll move.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you quickly repeat the questions?
No, I got yours. Yeah. I don't know. I know that we need an agenda for prosperity. I have ideas, but I'm not a politician. I keep telling politicians that. I can't sell them to politicians. You know, I know that you need far more. I'll be honest. I think what we have lost, and I'm young enough to remember when we had not lost it, is our ability to come out on the street. The last time we came out on the street, तुम सबको टोपी पहना गया by India against corruption. सबको टोपी पहना, क्या टोपी पहना आप लोगों को? So I'm not counting that. हाँ, किरण बेदी देखो, कहाँ सब कहाँ बैठे देखो, आराम से देखो. हाँ, तो वो टोपी छोड़ो. You know, you can always fool people to come out on the street, and maybe that has led to people feeling a bit disillusioned with the street. But there is no alternative to the street because establishment politics, and I'm not talking about, I'm not a communist. I'm not talking about revolution. I'm talking about the ability to demonstrate to the powers that be that when something happens that is unacceptable, first you have to accept it's unacceptable, there will not be the ability, like Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan has said, you know, it really exasperates me about this country. Sorry, galti ho gayi, kal nahi hoga. Ye kya hai? You know, what is this? So, if there is enough mobilization, now that requires a lot of things. That requires a leadership. I'm aware that leadership is not there. My biggest tragedy of my life, I don't understand how it happened, is that there are only two political parties in this country which are not dynastic. One is the Bharatiya Janata Party and the other is AAP. AAP bhi pata nahi ab uski biwi aane lagi hai. But so far, really not dynastic. Huh? I mean, now you'll say there are 54 and 3/4 MPs in the BJP who are dynastic. That's true. But they are not dynastic in the sense that DMK is, or BRS is, or TDP is, or any party. I mean, it is very clear there what the right of succession is. You know, even the very strong female political leaders in the states are looking for dynasts. They don't have them. Mamata ji is not married. But वो ढूंढ रही कहाँ अच्छा अभिषेक बैनर्जी को ले आओ, वो आकाश आनंद को ले आओ, वो ढूंढ रहे. I don't understand the politics of this, but I can tell you one thing. This is not a politics that is conducive to the street, and so I think my answer to you is very depressing, and I'm too old to be part of it. Which is that you need fewer. You know, I'll tell KTR this. You need fewer people like me in politics. You can't both, you know, be like me and go abroad and study and then be gentry and then come back. Then you'll become like writing petitions, which is what the Shiv Sena is doing. You'll write petitions. I'm good at writing petitions. I'm useless on the street. So we need politicians from the street. And yes.
Why are you so sure that it is a way out?
Pardon?
Why are you so sure that it is a way out?
That is the way out.
Why are you so sure that it is a way out? What if we're doomed to have compensation forever and it's slowly going up the ladder to us?
तब तो खराब ending होगा. But remember, I've spent my whole life getting enough evidence to keep that hope that the director will manage to deliver in the 17th reel. We used to have reels in those days. A happy ending. And I genuinely think it is possible in this country because look at the project in this country. This country should have bust open, you know, like a wound in a scooter accident in 1955. It's a cacophony of languages, a cacophony of people, so much inequality, such low fraternity, caste system, gender discrimination, ethnic discrimination, rudeness except in Hyderabad, you know. But at the same time, from this we did manage to get, I think, collective outcomes which we must remember we did not get lightly. So there is something I have faith in that is innate in this country, that if we are able to recognize injustice, we also throw out a dictator once. So there are so many things we have done in the past that I believe that if we are able to get to that point, then, but I think that point will only come if we go on the street. I would rate the possibility that we will be caught in the limbo of Brazil or Thailand today at about 75%. But I would love to bet on the remaining 25%. Your question on competitive exams, it is entirely up to you. And whether you decide, well, there's some things you should be doing, all of you, in the short run, purely selfishly, get the hell out of this country. It is no place for young people. Okay, that's my honest advice. You just get the hell out. Don't believe any bullshit unless you have a contractor parent who has 1,000 acres of tobacco land in Guntur. Even then, you'll go to jail once or twice. So be prepared to go to jail. Then you can bribe people to give you a TV and all that. But I mean, you can live that sort of life, but otherwise get out. If you're not going to get out, then you've got to think, you've got to be doing something that actually, I'm afraid I have to quote the RSS here, which is a central tenet in what they say to their Swayamsevaks, which I think very important, which is then just do what you want to do and don't worry about the result. Gita se aata hai. Comes from the Gita. Just do what you want to do. Don't worry about the consequences of what you do or the results you want to do of what you do. If you're able to do that, it's very difficult to do that. Very difficult to do that. Then you're okay, because what the exam is offering you is a probabilistic chance at becoming part of a system which is exploiting you today. So it's a choice you've got to take. You either join that system. Now, if there were enough of you who wanted to join it and subvert it from within, I can tell you it's a fool's paradise. I've seen that system from within. The government of India, I've worked in it. The governments of India. You will not be able to subvert that system from within. Because that system has a logic, existential logic of its own survival, which is impossible to break. Once you enter that system, you are going to be part of the dark side. You can quit halfway, many people have, I think you did. And yeah, and cheerfully too, as you can see. So, but it's going to be part of the dark side. So then the choices are fairly stark. Think of yourself. I think the best advice I can give you, it's easy for me to give you advice, because my life is over, and you know. Think of yourself as a 25-year-old in 1925. तुम्हें ICS पे जाना है या नहीं, या कुछ और करना है? सोचो. And the third question was?
The BJP being the only party that delivered.
No, BJP is the only party that, no, I didn't say only party that delivers. DMK also delivers. The only party that uses its party machinery to deliver. BRS Garus don't use BRS to deliver. They use IAS to deliver. Right? They use contractor to deliver. TDP Garus don't use TDP to deliver. They use IAS to deliver, they use contractors to deliver. Samajwadi Party uses such people. Poor Tejashwi is trying, nobody's asking him to deliver anything. But if he does, he's trying to deliver a party that delivers. Only DMK and BJP use their party to deliver. That, of course, is very interesting. That's the third thing in this election that I don't know. I mean, ghus sutta hu. But Modi and Shah have stopped using the party to deliver, I've heard. Because they've become what I call state dependent. Now they're using the IAS to deliver, you know, they've got into the tyranny of the 89 batch, by batch. So once you get the tyranny of the 89 batch, you lose your political connect. So in that sense, I meant the Congress lost its political connect a long time ago. Just think about 2009, if you're old enough. You know, when they came to power in 2009, they set up a NAC. Full of very good people, all my friends. Oh, what is this NAC? You have a party, no? Why do you want like good, you know, noble, gentry men and women to sit there and advise Sonia Gandhi on how to implement right to food, right to education? Why can't the Congress party do it? That is what the BJP succeeded in doing. And that is atrophying now, so there is hope. But I hope that answers your question.
We still have another 10 minutes. Can we go until 6?
Yeah.
Yeah. Please. Can you get the mic here? There's one question there and then one question here, and then we will take it from there.
So, you've spoken a lot about freebies and government jobs, right? So my question is, do you look at reservations, Arakshan, as a non-financial freebie? And if not, can you please explain to me why it isn't a freebie?
Yeah. वहाँ एक है और फिर यहाँ. We'll get it. We'll get it.
My question is, we all pay taxes, right? So,
My question in my mind is from very long, so I just wanted to know if the question is only for me or if the question is for everyone. We all pay a lot of taxes to the government. In return, what do we expect from them? Either it could be health, it could be roads, it could be anything. But are we getting proper hospitalization? No. We don't have proper facilities over there. Are we getting proper roads? No. If it's monsoon, the roads are pathetic. So aren't people getting questioned where my money, where my tax? On everything we pay GST. If I'm going for some luxury product, I'm paying 18 to 28% of GST. Isn't this question arising to everyone? Why am I paying so much of GST to government and where is this money going? There is no transparency from the government. Aren't these questions being raised among the youth? Where is this youth being gone? That's my question is.
See, like at the last result, there was a great system has been developed, like Gram Sachwalaya system, and it's been 1.6 lakhs jobs were provided. And still, people believe that, there is no employment. So when it comes to the count, it's very high, 1.6 lakhs jobs. And freebies again, I've heard a lot from you. Like, what is your take on it?
Okay, on reservations, I'll say it's a palliative that has not solved the problem that still exists in substantial measure in this country. I don't want to ask you to raise your hands. I'll start here, I'll go elsewhere. But I would like you to just think about it. Look around yourselves. Look at yourself and think. How many Dalits here? How many SCs? How many OBCs? Don't raise your hand. Well, I'm tripling that number. I'm tripling that number. This is despite reservations. How many chief secretaries are Dalit, OBC? It's the same thing as with gender. When I was at the UN, we had 50-50 recruitment of women and men at the bottommost level, which is called P1, P2. And then that fell to 20% women in grades P3, P4, P5, D1. D2, because the Secretary General, it went back to 40-60. So there was clearly need here for a process to be corrected, right? And that process clearly did not have to do with economic position, because anyone applying to the UN had to have a degree from the usual Ivy League and was smart and knew how to talk and spoke 3 languages, and nowadays children have to play golf and climb Mount Everest before they get an internship, right? So they did all that, but despite that you were getting this distinction. I'm seeing the same thing happening in India. I don't see any chief secretaries, very few, who are Dalits or tribals. In performatively, my president is a tribal. I don't even want to go to why she didn't go to Ayodhya, but anyway, performatively. But so I think that reservations are not a freebie. They're an attempt to solve a genuine problem where a minority of our population is not seen in the jobs which are the most visible, which are public service jobs. Forget private sector, public service jobs. And in fact, they have failed to solve that problem. Now, if anyone has a better idea to make sure that this majority of our population is seen in these jobs, other than reservation, I have open ears. But I am not have open ears to anyone who says that they are unfair to people who I am seeing every morning, and I am seeing in this audience, right? Okay, your question on tax is a very interesting question. I think I answered it, but let me clarify how I did. The government is spending a lot of money of your tax money. What it is giving back to you is compensation for its failures. That is why you are not getting publicly funded health education. That is why, because the fundamental thing a government has to do is to run an economy and a society such that people are able to afford, as I said, not the poor. Poor you can subsidize. That's a good use of tax. But we don't have that many poor left in this country. We have a lot of indigent people. We have people who are not poor and are going hungry. where people are not poor and not getting education, where people are not poor and getting bad health. That is the failure I'm describing. It is not the standard failure of a large poor country where lots of poor people are indigent and you're trying to move away from that. It's a country which has actually brought poverty down dramatically. But those who are not in poverty are hungry, do not have health, do not have education, and the government is spending all its resources trying to compensate for that. That is the problem. The government is also misspending some of your tax money on Vande Bharat, but I won't go there. Okay. But that is a scam. I mean, everyone wants to be part of this scam. Ki humko to first world feel chahiye. I can't help. But, it's a scam. Vande Bharat is a scam. Now, if people participate in that scam, government will provide you with money for that scam. Hota hai. But tax money is being spent on compensation. And that is why you're not getting the things that quite rightly you asked for. So the question to ask is, why are you not doing something to stop compensating us and start making prosperity at the center of the efforts that society and the state provide? Your question on Andhra, see, this is what I mean by, this is a trap. Dil hamesha more mangega. Andhra Pradesh's per capita income is higher than the per capita income of India. You are providing 1.6 agricultural jobs at what daily wage? I remember when I was put on the Andhra Pradesh State Reorganization Committee in 2014, I told Jairam Ramesh, से काय को इस पे डाल दो यार? I said वो नायडू जीतेगा तो कम्मा लोग गुंटूर में डालेगा कैपिटल, और ये दूसरा जगन जीतेगा तो रेड्डी लोग डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करेगा, और रायलसीमा में भी है, वाइजैग में भी है, वो जाएगा. So that is how the politics of extraction in Andhra is playing. It's agrarian extraction. And one thing I love about both Andhra and Telangana is that it's difficult to fool people here too much. So they're getting the game that what you're giving me is 1.6 lakh jobs, but we are not part of the bigger game where you're making money. We want in there. And so they're going to keep trying. It's a new state, they're going to keep trying. Thanks.
Slightly off topic from elections and the implications of that. Greatly admired your work on the fisc policy, and you keep writing this, that the two fundamental functions of any government is mobilizing resources and allocating resources in the most efficient. If you look at the last 10 years, despite COVID and all that, window dressing, the growth has been disappointing, the resource utilization has been disappointing. The number one item on your expenditure is interest payments. Is possibly something that we're not doing right. How slippery is the slope in your view?
The fisc is, I think, very stable and will continue to be stable because the government has tempered its expectations. The government, remember, in my view, the government of India is a weak state. It's a very weak state. Shall I tell you why it's a weak state? Maja aayega tumhe. I have only one challenge to every civil servant. Okay. Resources I'll give you, तुम ट्रैफिक ठीक करो, बस ट्रैफिक, बस एक चीज़ ठीक करो, ट्रैफिक ठीक करो, नहीं कर पाते, because society, the state is weak because the state is also, one, it is now a low ambition state. It has been bereft of ideology for a long time, and therefore it has also lost. I saw this in Government of India. I've seen this in some state governments also. I don't know about Telangana actually I've seen this, to be honest, I've seen this here also. But you see it more in Maharashtra, in Andhra. And it's a common thing in India's history. There has been so much debauchery happening with public money. The state has lost confidence that it can actually do the things that people expect it to do. Confidence chala gaya logon mein. Let me give you an example. So Keynes had a very famous thing he said, which I always follow as a public finance person. He said, during the war, people asked him, how are we going to finance this war? I said this during COVID. I said, if you can do it, you can afford it. Question is, can you do it? Same question I asked about Rahul Gandhi's apprenticeship scheme. I said, ठीक है, you will give 1 lakh. Will these apprentices actually be trained? Will they be able to then be fit for purpose to do better jobs than they're doing now? Do you have the confidence you can do that? Don't talk about setting up a department of skills under an undersecretary or joint secretary. Can you do it? That confidence has gone from government in India. And therefore with COVID, when they had said, let's not spend too much money, Suddenly I realized I was wrong and the state was right. उनकी औकात नहीं थी. They did not have the capability of spending money to prevent suffering in the country. So they did what they knew to do best. Some credit policy, some this, some that. So what has happened to the FISC? We have moderated our tax GDP ratio expectations down to 10% of GDP. That's enough. So Dada, we can't do. Privatization, I told them, you won't be able to do it. You can't do privatization on note sheet. You know, it requires a lot of expertise. It requires a lot of strength. नहीं होगा तुमसे. I was right. So you know, privatizing LIC is not a joke. No, we will do it. We will call a meeting. We will drink tea. We will write things on file. नहीं होता है. This is not how it works. Grow up. So the Indian state is also involved in very, you know, it's caught in this sort of childish loop of inaction. So for that reason, let me tell you something very interesting. I measure the size of government in India by total expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Do you know that has fallen since 1991? Today, Government of India, central government, expenditure GDP ratio is 14.1%. It used to be 19%, which means that the state has shrunk. And the state has shrunk because their confidence that they can do more has gone. One. Two, when you're doing Labharthi, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. You are taking money from here and giving it here, transfer. And for that, DBT has saved them. Because in DBT, you convert the world into an app. वो app पे डालो Paytm. Government of India is Paytm now. तुमसे लो, यहाँ दो. तुमसे लो, यहाँ दो. That's easy work. That does not involve hard work on part of the state. Once you have reconciled yourself to these things, the public finances are not going to go out of control because you're not going to be doing anything. You know, अगर आप घर में बैठोगे, तो बाहर रोड पे accident नहीं होगा. So that is what is happening to the government. A risk-taking government would go out there, try and spend money, try and do transformation. Once you've given up on that, your public finances are the least of your problems for that very sad reason.
Thank you, Rathin. I will have another 10 minutes, but I want to use this privilege of holding the mic to ask my question. I have to say that a lot of things that you have said in the last half an hour are things that I kind of know on a day-to-day basis. During the lockdown, one of the things that we were trying to persuade the government to do was to figure out how many people are going to get hungry at what point of time. Not very difficult to calculate, right? The data would be very easily available. There are ways in which we can calculate. The government said, don't tell us that. They said, don't tell us that because then we won't know what to do, because what if the numbers are too high? हम दे नहीं पाएंगे. आप हमको इतना बताओ कि हमारे पास कितना गेहूं है, कहाँ पे है और हम उसको कहाँ तक पहुँचा सकते हैं. आप बताओ कि ये 2 किलोमीटर नहीं 2.5 किलोमीटर तक पहुँचा दो, हम पहुँचा देंगे. लेकिन आप हमको ये मत बताओ कि कितने लोग भूखे होंगे कौन से तारीख को. आपको पता चल सकता है तो हमको जानना नहीं चाहिए. Right? Very clear. Right? This has been my experience with the government all the time. So one of the things that I've been constantly thinking about is, why would the government not want to know? And it doesn't want to know simply because of this problem that I don't know that I can actually deliver on what I'm myself saying. मैं बोल देता हूँ, कह दूंगा कि मैं गोली मार दूंगा, लेकिन मुझे मालूम नहीं कि मेरे बंदूक के अंदर गोली है या नहीं, चला पाऊंगा या नहीं. I don't know what I can do, right? So that's a problem. But and so many points in what you said so totally resonate with me. So one of the things that you haven't said, and which is what I want to kind of draw out a little bit, is that this subject called the Labharthi, is something which has been kind of constituted sometime after 1978, 79, around the time when we last defeated the dictator, the tyrant, right? We overthrew the dictator and we ended up somehow getting this state that is constantly producing this Labharthi, right? Now that happens in very interesting ways, which at that point of time, let's say in the 80s and late 80s, we began to talk about as the populist government, right? Populist government, but also competitive populism, because essentially what was happening at the time when the TDP was formed here was TDP says मैं 2 रुपये में किलो चावल दे दूंगी, तो कांग्रेस आके कहता है कि मैं 1 रुपया 80 पैसे में दे दूंगा, right? They're constantly competing with each other, and the only way they can do this is, as you said, कि ये जेब से निकाल इधर से निकाल के इधर देंगे, असल में वो ए जेब से निकाल के दूसरे जेब में डाल रहे हैं. So they were basically selling liquor on one side and getting that money out of it and then putting that back into the rice. That's what has been going on all along. Now here is the puzzle for me, which is that for the longest time, people who were in the media and were kind of opposed to the BJP, kind of opposed to this politics, were thinking that the Congress strength is playing the caste politics, is playing the regional games, and somehow they will be able to fight this overarching national story that is being told. And that we know now is a complete bogus thing. It has not worked at all. We know it doesn't work because if you can play that game, then they can play that game much better than you. And that's what has happened. So now what do we do? TDP, in TMC, the Trinamool Congress in Bengal, DMK, YS Congress here, all these different regional satraps, will they ever be able to get together and say that we are the alternative? Obviously, it doesn't look like that because they don't know what else to do other than offering more, and there's somebody else who's able to offer that better than them, right? And that's the problem. And I'm saying this because what these guys have done, I partly disagree with what you said, that let's say no other party has done this. In 1995, Telugu Desam party in this state delivered everything through the party. Everything through the party, and what they actually did is to draw in more and more people into the party through those delivery processes, right? And what actually happened was very interesting at that time. In 19 to push the economic reforms, the banks actually began to look at states as possible alternative actors, right? So they formed consortiums to finance S.N. Krishna in Bangalore, Chandrababu Naidu here, Buddhadev in Bengal. So they were doing this game of somehow finding these poster boys, and these poster boys were building their own startups to get this job done, and that was it, right? So I'm wondering now if that has to stop. Can the leadership actually come even from within that? Because all the names that you mentioned of the younger leaders are actually coming from these very parties, right? So is there a shift, right? And I think that it's really, really important for us to look at that. Even if there's no possibility of doing anything, we have to go back to the idea that somehow, my brain tells me that we're going to fail, and my body, my spirit tells me that I have to win. I just can't give up, right? So you have to keep at it, and you have to keep at it only by doing this, by inventing how we're going to do it. So at some level, that intellectual work of identifying who are those actors going to be is also on us. So
thank you for telling about the 95. I had no idea, and that's very helpful to know. And to be fair, if you're looking at history, DMK also did that. AIDMK also did that. Sharad Pawar did that in Maharashtra back in the 70s with the Congress machinery through the cooperative movement and all that. Today they don't. So somehow they sort of walked out of using the party and the movement that they created. I think you're absolutely right. But then I think this is a good place for me to sort of conclude. You see, we have focused in this entire conversation on the state. But actually what ails us, I think, and when I said I'm sort of amazed that India has survived, it is because we have a very nasty society. Very nasty society. And what I think is ailing us here is the fact that, let me tell you something interesting actually. If you look at the Indian Constitution, the preamble, it says the state shall endeavor to guarantee liberty, foster inequality, the state, and to promote fraternity, which means it acknowledges the state cannot promote fraternity. Fraternity comes from within society. I've written about this. And India is one of the lowest fraternity societies that I have seen. When you have low fraternity societies, then, and in fact this is with bigoted limits, this is the RSS's big project, to create a social order that enhances fraternity amongst a certain group of people, right? Possibly by lowering their fraternity or increasing their hate towards others. But the point is that there is fraternity. Now, that they want their fraternity, rising. And if you don't have that, then you will end up with dynasties. I think you're so right about, if you look at the DMK, If you look at TDP under NTR, before, as you say, the World Bank and the IMF came in and did all this. Even if you look at the CPM and the land reform movement, these were all movements, social movements, that attempted to address, broaden the fraternity space. Somewhere, we will have to recapture this. The big problem that has happened, which I'll conclude with, is take education. You were all asking about education. I refuse to look at education because it depresses me profoundly. You know why? Because education is treated as a technocratic problem. It's not a technocratic problem. The problem is that in society, your parents don't want to educate you. They want you to get jobs. The two things are different. They really don't want to educate you, most parents. I mean everybody says my papa is an exception. Yeah, as an asset class, nobody's interested in education. They want a credential, they want a job, they want post-retirement security, they want you to marry off your son or daughter, they want a plot, and then they want you to reproduce, recapitulate, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. That's how society is working. These are atomized, low fraternity societies. Add to that caste, add to that gender discrimination. So I think the solution would be, as you rightly said, a social inquiry into how we can foster social movements. मैंने गुस्से के बारे में बात की. Social movement गुस्सा से पैदा होता है, लेकिन constructive चीजें भी होते हैं. When I say education, take the colleges in Hyderabad. Name them for me. How many of them are government college 1, historically government college 2? Bombay, St. Xavier's College, Jai Hind College. Delhi, St. Stephen's College, Hindu College, Kirodimal College. Schools. These were not state projects. These were fraternal projects, and then the state took them on. But somewhere then, we made them Department of Education, Joint Secretary, technical fix. And that has got to change. You take the entire discussion on the curriculum. Curriculum should be a social discussion, but society is absent in the discussion of what we teach, how we teach it, to whom we teach it, for what we teach it. And that is just one example. When it comes to health, there's a lot of fraternity involved in the concept that we should all use a hospital. And we don't. This inequality in the country has exacerbated this. When I was a child, I used to take trains. We couldn't afford to fly. When you take a train, even if you're rich, you see, you have to go to the platform. You may be traveling in first class, you have to deal with the second class unreserved. Abhi to Indigo Zindabad, wahan jao. You only complain, kahan se aa gaya. But he's also rich, you're also rich. That distance is not there. Another example of that loss of fraternity we've had through this gated community living. I always tell people the reason why tier 2 and tier 3 towns are collapsing is, in the old days, when a civil servant, say like you, retired, you come from Hyderabad, you're lucky, but suppose you came from Guntur or Tenali. They used to go back. I remember Admiral Avati from the Indian Navy, Vice Chief of Naval Staff, he went and retired in Karad, in Maharashtra. When they did that, you see, when the district administration got a call from them, saying, Pani thik nahi hai, power thik nahi hai, Admiral Sahab bol rahe hai, let's do something. So you gave back to your communities in a social way. Now if everyone is going to live in Gurgaon and Gachibowli, then we are all gating that capital into ourselves, further reducing fraternity. So I think my response to you would be that we need political parties that pay more attention to fraternity. From fraternity will come prosperity, not the other way around. Can I just take a minute to thank everyone for your patience? I hope I've not bored you. I'm terrified of boring people. I should teach once. And I look forward to interacting with you guys again in the months to come. Thank you.
Hello everyone once again. This is Momita from CDPP. I hope I'm being loud enough right now. Once again, thank you everyone for your active participation. I think Dr. Rathin and Dr. Anant sir has given us a lot to not just to think about, but to also write about and debate upon once we reach our homes for sure. As a token of our appreciation, the CDPP would like to gift sir 2 of our publications, which we hope will help you or aid you in your continued efforts in the future. A big round of applause, please, everyone. And of course, we would like to thank everyone here at Lamakaan, especially the staff, for taking such good care of us as always. Thank you.